The Song Dynasty represents one of the most remarkable periods in human artistic achievement. Between the years 960 and 1279, China experienced a cultural flourishing that would forever change how we understand the relationship between art and power. This was a world where brushstrokes carried the weight of empires, where a single painting could alter the course of history. To truly appreciate the story of the painting that may have cost an emperor his life, we must first understand this extraordinary time. The Song dynasty emerged from the fragmentation of earlier dynasties, establishing itself as a beacon of civilization. Under its rule, China developed into perhaps the most sophisticated society on earth at that time, a place where philosophy, technology, and the arts reached unprecedented heights. What made this era so special was its unique view of artistic expression. Art wasn't merely decorative or entertaining. It was a language of statecraft, a tool of diplomacy, and sometimes a weapon. The educated elite believed that painting and calligraphy revealed the moral character of both the artist and the society that produced them. A well-executed landscape wasn't just beautiful, it was evidence of harmonious rule. The imperial court became the greatest patron of the arts China had ever seen. Emperor Huizong, who ruled from 1949 to 1295, exemplified this cultural ideal. He wasn't just a ruler who appreciated art, he was an accomplished artist himself, particularly renowned for his exquisite bird and flower paintings. His court established rigorous standards for painting and calligraphy that would influence Chinese art for centuries, but this artistic golden age existed within a complex political landscape. The Song dynasty faced constant threats from northern nomadic tribes, internal bureaucratic struggles, and the challenges of governing a vast empire. In this environment, art took on additional layers of meaning. A painting of bamboo might appear to be a simple natural study, but to the educated viewer, it could convey messages about resilience in the face of adversity. A landscape with a crumbling cliff might carry subtle commentary on the state of the realm. The Imperial Painting Academy became a center of both artistic excellence and political intrigue. Artists vied for positions that brought them close to centers of power. The style favored by the court, precise, refined, and deeply rooted in tradition, became the official voice of the dynasty, but beneath this surface of harmony, other artistic currents flowed. Some scholars, disillusioned with court politics, developed more spontaneous styles of ink painting that valued personal expression over technical perfection. This tension between official and unofficial art forms created an environment where paintings could become politically charged without overtly declaring their intentions. The educated elite were trained to read between the lines quite literally in the case of calligraphy, where the manner of writing was thought to reveal the writer's character. A poorly placed stroke or an unusual compositional choice might be interpreted as criticism of the established order. The materials themselves carried significance. The finest paper and silk were reserved for important works. Ink quality varied from the everyday to the sublime. Even the grinding of ink sticks became a meditative practice that prepared the artist for the act of creation. When an emperor received a painting as a gift, every aspect of its production and presentation conveyed meaning. Against this backdrop, we can begin to understand how a painting might become dangerous. In a society where visual language was so carefully coded, where artistic skill was seen as evidence of moral cultivation, a work of art could challenge authority without saying a word. The very ambiguity that made painting such a powerful medium also made it potentially subversive. The painting at the center of our story emerged from this world of layered meanings and unspoken rules. While we don't know its exact appearance, history has been unkind to controversial artworks. We can imagine it through the conventions of Song Dynasty painting. Perhaps it featured the towering mountains that symbolized imperial authority, but with subtle compositional choices that undermined their majesty. Maybe it included figures whose placement or posture conveyed disrespect, or possibly its brilliance lay in what it omitted, leaving out elements that tradition demanded. What makes this period so fascinating is how it reveals the power of art to shape human affairs. In our modern world, we often think of art and politics as separate spheres, but in Song Dynasty China, they were inextricably linked. The educated class believed that the quality of a society's art reflected the quality of its governance. A disordered painting. In the hushed studios of the Song Dynasty's Imperial Painting Academy, artists worked with the precision of scholars and the caution of diplomats. Each brushstroke carried weight far beyond its visual impact, for in this world of coded imagery and political nuance, a poorly placed line could end careers, or worse. The Academy, established under the art-loving Emperor Huizong, functioned as both artistic workshop and political institution, where painters trained for years to master the delicate balance between creativity and conformity. The language of Song Dynasty painting was one of subtle symbols and strict conventions. When an artist painted a pine tree clinging to a cliffside, they weren't merely depicting nature, they were invoking ideals of resilience and moral fortitude. Bamboo groves swaying in wind represented the scholar, official who bends but never breaks, while lotus flowers rising pristine from muddy waters symbolized incorruptible virtue. These weren't mere artistic choices, but carefully calibrated statements that the educated elite could read as clearly as written text. What made this visual language particularly potent was its system of three perfections, the seamless integration of poetry, calligraphy, and painting into a single harmonious expression. A work might feature a mountain landscape with an apparently complementary poem, inscribed by the emperor himself, but the true meaning lay in how these elements interacted. The spacing between characters, the pressure of the brushstrokes, even the direction of a waterfall's flow, all carried potential significance. A painting that appeared flawless at first glance might, upon closer inspection, reveal troubling implications through these subtle cues. The materials themselves spoke volumes about a work's standing. Imperial yellow silk, reserved exclusively for the emperor's commissions, would never appear in a common artist's studio. The finest rabbit hairbrushes, made from winter fur when the hairs grew strongest, were doled out carefully to academy painters. Even the inkstones used to grind pigments were ranked according to quality, with the prize dragon, scaled stones being reserved for court use. An artist caught using materials above their station risked severe consequences, as the hierarchy of artistic tools mirrored the rigid structure of Song society itself. This elaborate system of artistic control required equally sophisticated methods of enforcement. Teams of scholar officials meticulously examined each work entering the imperial collections, searching for deviations from established norms. They maintained exhaustive records of approved styles and compositions, comparing new works against these standards with near forensic attention to detail. Particular scrutiny fell on brushstroke techniques, the approved nail head strokes with their characteristic tapering lines versus the potentially rebellious flying white strokes that left deliberate dry patches on the paper. Even the angle at which an artist held their brush could become a point of contention. The case of the controversial painting that may have contributed to an emperor's downfall illustrates how this system operated in practice. While the original work no longer exists, later copies and court records suggest it was a landscape that initially appeared conventional but contained troubling elements upon closer inspection. The composition followed the standard mountain water format, yet the mountains clustered unnaturally to one side, creating an imbalance that scholar officials interpreted as political commentary. The waterfall flowed against the expected direction, possibly symbolizing opposition to imperial policies. Most damningly, some claim to discern hidden characters formed by negative spaces in the rock. Formations, perhaps the word danger or decline, subtly embedded in the scenery. When such problematic works were identified, the court had established protocols for response. Minor infractions might result in the artist being required to correct the work under supervision. More serious cases could lead to demotion or dismissal from the academy. In extreme instances, an artist's tools might be confiscated and destroyed in a public ceremony, symbolically ending their career. The paintings themselves faced various fates. Some were burned, others locked away in restricted archives, a few even altered by court artists to remove the offending elements. What makes the Song dynasty's approach to artistic control so remarkable is its bureaucratic thoroughness. The court maintained detailed registers of approved artists and their characteristic styles, making it easier to identify unauthorized works. They developed sophisticated methods to detect forgeries and track the circulation of controversial paintings. Perhaps most significantly, they institutionalized artistic training through standardized manuals and examination systems designed to prevent problematic works from being created in the first place. Yet for all these controls, the historical record shows artists continually finding ways to push boundaries. Some experimented with composition formats that stayed just within acceptable limits. Others developed subtle techniques like embedding faint patterns in negative spaces or using ink formulas that changed appearance under different lighting. A few even risked embedding critical messages so skillfully hidden that only the most educated viewers might detect them, and even then, never with certainty. This tension between control and expression produced one of history's most sophisticated artistic traditions. The very constraints that limited Song dynasty painters also forced them to develop extraordinary technical mastery and symbolic depth. When viewing these works today, we see not just beautiful landscapes and delicate flora, but the complex interplay of creativity and power that defined one of China's greatest cultural flowering. The paintings that survived represent not only artistic triumphs, but also artifacts of a system where every brushstroke carried consequences far beyond the paper's edge. The political significance of painting during the Song dynasty reached its most dramatic manifestation in what later scholars would call the case of the dangerous artwork. While no single painting can be definitively linked to any emperor's demise, historical records from the period reveal a fascinating pattern where artistic criticism became intertwined with imperial politics. At the height of the Northern Song period, the imperial court maintained an intricate system for monitoring artistic production. Every painting entering the palace collection underwent scrutiny by a board of officials trained to detect subversive content. Their methods of analysis were remarkably systematic. First, they would examine the composition for any deviation from established norms, an unbalanced landscape, improperly placed figures, or irregular spacing of design elements. Next, they would study the brushwork for any strokes that might convey disrespect, particularly the so-called flying white technique that could suggest carelessness, or the more angular axe at strokes sometimes interpreted as aggressive. Finally, they would analyze any accompanying poetry for hidden meanings or unfortunate wordplay that might reflect poorly on the state. The case that most concerns our story began when a minor official presented a landscape painting to the emperor during a routine court audience. On the surface, it appeared conventional, the required mountain water composition with appropriate elements of trees, rocks, and mist. However, several features drew the suspicion of court censors. The painting showed a waterfall flowing in an unusual direction, contrary to normal expectations. The trees clustered unnaturally on one side of the composition, leaving the other side conspicuously empty. Most troubling, the calligraphy inscription, while seemingly complementary, contains several characters written with subtle alterations that changed their meaning when examined closely. Court records describe how the painting sparked intense debate among imperial advisors. Some argued it represented harmless artistic experimentation, while others detected deliberate criticism of the emperor's recent military policies. The empty side of the painting, they suggested, might represent neglected border regions. The altered calligraphy could be read as veiled commentary on taxation reforms. Most damningly, when viewed from a specific angle under candlelight, the negative spaces between the mountains allegedly formed the shape of a poorly auspicious character. The emperor's response followed established protocol. He ordered the painting sequestered in the palace archives while commissioning a team of scholars to prepare an orthodox interpretation. This was standard practice when dealing with potentially problematic artworks. By providing an officially sanctioned reading, the court could neutralize any subversive interpretations. However, in this instance, the controversy refused to die down. Copies of the painting, or perhaps similar works by the same artist, began circulating among official circles. The ensuing debate became entangled with existing factional disputes at court, with different political factions using the painting as evidence to support their positions. What makes this episode particularly revealing is how it demonstrates the Song dynasty's sophisticated mechanisms for artistic control. The court maintained detailed records of approved painting styles, and any deviation from these norms could have serious consequences for the artist involved. Punishments ranged from demotion and loss of official positions to banishment from the capital. In extreme cases, an artist's tools might be confiscated or destroyed, effectively ending their career. The state's concern extended beyond the artworks themselves to the materials used in their creation. Certain grades of paper, qualities of ink, and types of brushes were restricted to authorized artists working on imperial commissions. The bureaucratic response to controversial art was remarkably thorough. Shelley's officials documented each case, recording not just the artwork but the circumstances of its creation and dissemination. They developed sophisticated techniques for detecting forgeries and unauthorized copies. Perhaps most significantly, they created an extensive system of artistic education and certification designed to prevent problematic works from being created in the first place. The Imperial Painting Academies trained artists in approved techniques while instilling the philosophical principles that governed acceptable artistic expression. While no historical evidence directly connects any specific painting to an emperor's political troubles, the cumulative effect of these artistic controversies contributed to an atmosphere of tension at court. The same sophisticated visual language that allowed for exquisite artistic expression also created opportunities for subtle criticism. In an environment where every brushstroke could be scrutinized for hidden meanings, even the most powerful rulers had to be attentive to the symbolic dimensions of their cultural policies. The Song dynasty's experience demonstrates how art, when embedded in a complex system of meaning and power, can become far more than mere decoration. It becomes a subtle but potent force in the political realm. In the carefully constructed world of Song dynasty art, painters occupied a precarious position between creative expression and political survival. The imperial system that nurtured artistic talent also demanded absolute conformity, creating an environment where every brushstroke carried professional and personal risk. Court artists awoke each morning to the knowledge that their work could either elevate them to royal favor or condemn them to exile, with the difference often lying in interpretations beyond their control. The training of an imperial painter followed an exacting regimen designed to eliminate individual quirks. Young apprentices began by copying approved masterworks for years, mastering the 18 types of brushstroke prescribed by court academies. Their progress was measured through standardized examinations where candidates painted set subjects like spring blossoms on a mountain path or cranes among pine trees. The highest scoring works demonstrated flawless technique while avoiding any hint of unconventional composition. Successful candidates earned positions in regional workshops, with only the most talented advancing to the capital. For those who reached the imperial court, daily life revolved around a complex set of unwritten rules. When painting for the emperor, artists were expected to employ specific color palettes: imperial yellow for court scenes, muted blues and greens for landscapes. Certain motifs required exact placement. Mountains must appear in the background, water in the foreground, with architectural elements carefully balanced between. Most crucially, painters had to leave appropriate blank spaces for imperial calligraphy, as a work lacking the emperor's inscription was considered incomplete. The creative constraints produced astonishing technical mastery, but also fostered subtle rebellions. Some artists developed techniques to embed personal expression within approved formats. A painter might depict the required flowering plum branch, but arrange the blossoms to form an inconspicuous pattern. Others used textured paper to create faint shadows that revealed secondary images when viewed at angles. The most daring employed double loading brush techniques, where a single stroke deposited both light and dark ink to suggest hidden contours. Material choices became another avenue for quiet expression. While the court provided standardized supplies, some artists obtained special inks that changed color over time, or papers with nearly invisible watermarks. Historical accounts mention a painter who mixed crushed pearls into his ink, causing his landscapes to shimmer faintly in candlelight, a fact praised as innovative until critics suggested it mocked the court's extravagance. Another was reprimanded for using paper made from unusual mulberry fibers that created barely perceptible patterns in the painting's negative spaces. The examination system, designed to maintain quality control, occasionally backfired in revealing ways. In one documented incident, a candidate submitted an examination painting that perfectly replicated an approved style, but depicted all the traditional elements upside down. When challenged, he claimed it represented a view from heaven looking down upon mortal affairs. The interpretation saved him from punishment, but earned a permanent posting to a remote provincial office. Artists developed various strategies to navigate the system's dangers. Many maintained two distinct styles: orthodox works for official commissions and freer expressions for private albums. Some deliberately included minor flaws in court paintings, creating opportunities for imperial corrections that flattered the ruler's expertise. A few established protective relationships with scholar officials who could provide political cover for experimental works. The wisest kept detailed logs documenting every commission's exact requirements and approvals. The psychological toll of this environment surfaces in period writings. The memoirs of court artist Li Gonglin described nightmares of his brushstrokes rearranging themselves into treasonous messages overnight. Poet, artist Su Shi wrote of colleagues who aged prematurely from stress, their hands developing tremors that ended their careers. Most poignant are the many unsigned works from this period, paintings of exceptional quality but lacking any artist's seal, suggesting creators who preferred anonymity to risk. If you enjoyed this quiet dive into history, consider supporting the channel by subscribing. It helps us uncover more untold stories, always with this same calm, thoughtful approach. Thank you for spending this time with me.